and welcome back to episode 2 of Rive Noir Rescore with me. My name is Mitchell Benham, and I'm going to be going through one of my scores from when I was a bit younger. I studied architecture, and we made a film set in the Brisbane North Bank area, and I wrote an original score for it. I did it in GarageBand, and we covered that in the previous video, so please go and have a look at that. Please join me as I go through the next stage. We're in Logic, where we've got to, after the previous evening's work, we've imported from GarageBand into Logic, and now we can get to work reanalyzing and rescoring. And my theory is not to really rewrite a lot of the music. I think the structure works. I think the different themes that the characters in the film have do work. Simple, but they work. And I think it's the sounds used are very poor because they're just the stock ones that come with GarageBand. The quality of those are not very high. And so I'm going to be re-looking at some of those sounds tonight. And before I studied architecture, I did actually study music. And one of my tutors at the time, when talking about things like songwriting or scoring or any of those types of topics, would always talk about how the song and the songwriting and the musical work was most important. He would always talk about how the musical foundations were more important than anything, the melody and the chords and the structure, and then the production and the sounds and all that sort of stuff on top was important on top, but that the best songs work just really stripped back, just the guitar, just the piano. And if you can perform your song in that way, solo, acoustic, unplugged, call it whatever you want, if you can do that with your song and it's still a good song, then you have on your hands a good song. And so I've collected some examples of songs that I think are great songs that are performed in a either solo instrument kind of fashion, or are reinterpreted in a very minimalist style, and I think that's a good place to start, to listen to some of these songs and just have a think about them.
It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor chord and the major lift, the baffled king for the hallelujah.
Looking at it now, it all seems so simple. We were lying on your couch. I remember.
Where are those happy days? They seem so hard to find. I tried to reach for you, but you have closed your mind. Whatever happened to our love?
So these songs are all very different, from different time periods, different genres, different backgrounds, all of that sort of thing. But ultimately they're all good songs, and I could sit and listen to those in those arrangements and think these are good songs, these songs work. And then so I've been thinking about how best to start with this piece, and so I've got the GarageBand sounds here, and I've set up today my little keyboard that I don't use very often, but I have. I have this keyboard, and it's and then thinking through those examples, I was thinking, let's just use a single piano, and let's use just the one piano. And the piano I'm going to use is the Spitfire Audio Labs soft piano. So this is a standard upright piano with a felt piece in front of the hammers, so when the hammers hit the strings, it's got a softer sound. Now this one is free, and you can go and download it, and it's excellent. It's really nice, and it's got that soft quality to it. And there's some controls here, expression that I've got on my keyboard on the wheel. And also you can adjust the reverb. So that's the sound that I'm going to be using. And then down the bottom here we have the sound effects tracks. So there's the siren, there's lots of footsteps, and then just ambience kind of background stuff. So I'm going to do a separate episode of that. So we can mute that off now, but we'll come back to that in a later episode when we re-record some of those sounds and line them up a bit better and just generally do a better job. It was a bit of a rush, and I did it quickly. It was good enough, and I think it works well enough. But let's sit down now and do it properly. So now we're just left with this here. So yeah, the sounds most commonly used are this one called reflective strings, which is just one of the built-in Logic sounds. It's just quite a simple string sound. It does have a bit of delay on it, a bit of echo, a bit of reverb, but we can come back to that as well. The other one is this sound called Metropolis, which is this sort of pulsing sort of sound, and then an organ as well, angelic organ. So these are just GarageBand presets. So it's got a bit of drive to it, a bit of dirtiness. So that's right underneath. And then the other one is this horn sound, horn section. So the big punchy horn. So these are the ones that are most disappointing to me, I think, because they're so plasticky. So step one for me is I'm actually just going to go and I'm going to replace all of these sounds with the Labs piano. Turn a bit of reverb up, put it in the middle somewhere. So we're opening lots of different, lots of the same thing, which I still think will sound quite nice. And we'll just play this in a second and see how it goes. There are other sounds in the Labs range. I think there's about 24 now, and they're all really good. And I think later on I will use some of them. And I just have to kind of keep myself limited in this particular. So let's see how this sounds now. Again, no sound effects. Because of the echo. So I think musically that's still quite interesting in its own way. I think the obvious issue is some of these long notes where you get nothing. So this is the main part, I guess, at the moment, is this one here. And so the issue is that that there where it's playing, where the sound is because that first note is held, there's no movement for the rest of the for the rest of those bars. So we need to do something about that. And so if we can do that, I think the three notes all landing slightly off is probably quite nice to keep the movement up. That off to one side. This one below is the same, where it's just the one big note. So what we can do there is we can do what we did just before, and yeah, just delaying the note a little bit. We can pull this right up and get a nice big chord out of it, rather than it just being, rather than it just being like a one-off. We can really go for it. And so in this one, we'll put this one up a bit higher, a bit more reverb. And that chord is actually happening at the same time as this other one, which has got that the G sharp in it, rather than, so if we got the two of them, it's quite a complex chord. So the three of these together so I think that sound is quite nice, and then we get because that was just a horn before going bah. And then this one as well is the next one along, and it walks upwards. And so it's doing the opposite. And what can work here is we'll go just straight up the octave. So instead of playing just one note, it plays two. And when we combine all of those together from this section, we will have so this one, because it is a pad, what we will do is we'll get into some, and I do want to just maintain this idea that during this bit, instead of it being I want to retain that feel. And one of the ways that you can do that is actually, I think, what we'll do. And we will put on, let's go into the sound here. So let's call that, Metropolis pads. So we'll leave that name there. But what we'll do is we'll go into the compressor. This had the echo. I'll actually change that echo out for the tape delay, which I think is better. And you may have heard before, this is all synced to the click. In 6.8, and so we hear it later on that one of the instruments picks up that sound. And we'll really boost this in the compressor. The bit of distortion that gives is actually pretty intense. So yeah, from a mix position, we'll pull that down. But that's quite good. And what we'll do is we'll use, there's a whole bunch of these effects, which I think can work really well, like tremolo. So let's give this one a go. And so this sound gives us that panning kind of thing. So it still has that sort of rhythm to it. And it's panning. And this is one of the ones where it gets quite long between key strikes. So we'll go back to this delay. We'll give it a bit. We'll just give it more of everything. I think more is more. And then we go back to this again. Thing. That's okay. I think that still works. Kind of skipping ahead a little bit here, but these ones, the problem with them is that they're all so the same. So I'm going to reduce the velocity on the second lot. And then back here we've got that ties in nicely with this one. And then these ones here, orchestral strings. So what we're going to do, just real quick, is I'm going to go to the automation window, automation view, and then for this section here, so the volume doesn't change, but the labs control, we've got expression, and we can put some of this in, and then when we go back to the labs window, we should be able to see this one move. Shape, some more mixy stuff, so that has a bit more of an interest to it. You get this higher amount of bit more power. Cool. So we'll come back to some of those as well, and then here going to do as well on here, now that I'm listening to it, is I'm going to put some reverb on. I quite like that sound. Is it this one? I'm going to bring this up so it's full range. We're going to set this down to somewhere that's more reasonable, because if not we'd be in trouble. Then we're going to pull all this down again so it's reasonable. Thank you very much for watching this second episode of Rescore. I will be back next week with the next part. I hope you enjoyed the process I went through and just found it as interesting as I did. Re-looking at some of these parts again for the first time in 9 or 10 years has been an eye-opening experience. I think the Labs piano sounds really good. I think there's a use for that in the final score, potentially. I like the rhythm of it and the way it sounds, just with a bit of reverb, just with that little bit of delay on it. The tremolo effect, I think, helps simulate the pad sound quite well. So thank you for watching. I will see you next week for the next stage. Not sure what the next stage will be just yet, but we'll get there soon. Give us a thumbs up, that really helps, and also leave any feedback in the comments below. I'd love to read what your thoughts are for my interesting little project. Thanks very much. Good night.